For this week's craft, look over here at this tiny Jurassic Park I made. But if this is Jurassic Park, why does the gate say HUDSONFILM? Now you might be thinking,
what kind of park is this?
To answer that, let's take a stroll down Petticoat Lane, back 65 million years ago to the summer of 2002. The pre-YouTube era, when you used to steal your parents' Hi8 camcorder to create 2-hour remakes of Jurassic Park. We all remember this phase in our life. The summer came to be known as Jurassic Summer, as my siblings, cousins, and I spent our entire summer vacation meticulously yet pretty casually recreating our favorite film in its entirety. Over the course of 2 months, our home was transformed into baby's first film studio to become Jurassic Park. The whole thing was shot chronologically and edited in camera, since video editing was far beyond what the family computer could handle at the time. Days were spent waking up, wrestling the cast off Neopets.com to get them back on set, then figuring out how to shoot the day's scene using our action figures and the best costumes no money can buy. If you want to watch the whole movie, link is in the description.
Clever girl.
But here it is summed up in 10 seconds. Oh, hey Studs. Welcome to Studson Studio. Thanks for joining me on today's journey while I tackle a project I have been wanting to do for quite some time now. Today I'll be turning my childhood home into a Jurassic Park Visitor Center and diorama. This project holds a lot of sentimental value, not just because of the personal nostalgia, but because this is also going to be a gift for my dad. If you're my dad, you're about to see some gift spoilers, and if you're not my dad, that's okay too. This won't be an entirely dad-focused video. But allow me to indulge into some dad memories for just a bit, if you will. My dad is a very handy and creative guy, and one of my biggest influences when it comes to this channel and the various creative things I've done through my life. He's always been very ambitious when it comes to doing it yourself, with hobbies that have ranged from building a hobby train set, restoring classic cars, a constant flow of woodworking projects, and the biggest craft project of them all, building the house I grew up in by hand with my grandpa. So it feels fitting to be building him a miniature version of the house that he built. But more than any of that, my parents have always spared no expense when it came to supporting the creative things that my brother, sisters, and I have done. The shelves and walls in their home office are an art museum devoted to our mediocre talent. So let this project stand as a tribute to my parents and to our Jurassic summer. And for the rest of you, happy 27th, almost 28th anniversary of Jurassic Park.
Perfect timing.
But for now, just sit back and relax while I go into some vague detail about how I made this thing, while I occasionally get sidetracked into some historical Studson anecdotes. As you can see, the general shape of the house is pretty much already done, so there isn't much left to narrate, so I guess that's it. See you next time, everybody. Looks like I'm out of a job.
Don't you mean extinct?
The general concept here was to use the design of the Jurassic Park Visitor Center to build a version of my family's house in the same style, as if it were a concrete and thatched roof bungalow. I made a stencil for the top roof supports, then cut it out several times on foam board, which will be textured to look like concrete beams later in the build. One of the more challenging parts here was cutting these roof segments to their proper size so they came together at clean edges, but the trick here was to cut them way larger than needed, then shave off tiny slivers at a time off camera so that when I assembled it on camera, I could make it look effortless. Here I'm making an entrance to the garage, where I'll later
Raise the gate.
with a partially open garage door. One of the architectural elements that I think really helps make this building look like a brutalist fortress is all the angles and skewed lines. There are very few vertical edges, which was a challenge for connecting the walls together, but the fact that the building gets more narrow as it goes up helps give the illusion that this chunky trapezoid is very heavy and needs that juicy booty to help support the weight. Next we need door in a building, so I'm upgrading my normal house door to this big ol' fossil slab, then using cardstock to make stacks on stacks of concrete beams. At this point, the basic house shape is done and it's starting to look like the Pizza Hut I grew up in.
No one out-pizzas the Hut.
But do you know who does out-pizza the Hut? The newest patrons that have joined in on this Patreon pizza party. Special thanks to Nilani Proctor, Lisa Pelaire, Tesla Coiled, Brendan Moulton, Tice, and Tom Baines. It's fine financiers like these folks and the existing patrons that have spared no expense in keeping this channel operating. Check out the Patreon link in the description and, well, there it is. Time to take this door to the bone zone. I have this properly feathered T-Rex miniature which I think looks more like a 3-inch turkey. I'm going to first bisect it by slicing here right across the belly, then pluck all of its feathers off until it looks completely boned. I'm embedding this fossil into a layer of air-dry clay, and then my attempt at adding more fossils was just to jab at the clay with a wire brush. For the door, it's a bunch of cardboard super glued together, and the doorknob is... I actually can't remember. I think it was the rotation peg for this robotic puppy action figure, which makes absolutely no sense now that I'm saying it out loud, and it doesn't really help you replicate your door handles for your future crafting, but the point is, it's garbage, it can be anything. Y'all already know my stance when it comes to goop. You must always stipple it to make it less brushy and more crusty. The finer the texture, the better, since we're aiming for a pretty smooth concrete appearance. After that, it's time to splatter the face of my victim with this black venomous goop. Here's some tasty trivia. In my version of the movie, we used chocolate pudding and it really stings the eyes. After sealing up the model and doing a little bit more goop stippling, it was time for prime. And here it is, primed in gray, which is also the color of concrete, so we're calling it base coated too. What other colors is concrete? Maybe a lighter gray? Maybe another slightly less light gray? Cool. Next, brown bones. Then I dry brushed the dry bones. Then I wanted to make sure these bones really pop, so I hit just the surrounding area with an Agrax earth shade. To add some visual interest to this wall of gray, I highlighted the edges and cracks using a homemade black wash. And then we're going to head up to the roof where I'm going to use some of this Woodland Scenic static grass straw as roof thatching. If you're bad at jars and you accidentally glued the lid on, just use a knife to decapitate the lid and then use all of the glue in one sitting before you throw it away.
One last ride.
Then I broke out the old static grass applicator, poured in a few lovely locks of hair, and turned the house into a blonde chia pet. I learned this particular hairy roof technique from Luke Towen's treehouse video, which was a great watch. Make sure to press down the roof hairs in one direction, then go back in with a second pass to make sure the roof is extra thick and bushy. And then lastly, we'll make sure the door locks in place with a hot glue glob, and it's a house. Success! The more I looked at the house, the more I hated how light the roof was. I decided to give it a little more brown town, and the airbrush is the easiest way to do that. I'm using a flat earth to bring it over the curve and really round out the look. I didn't bother masking anything off since any brown overspray would just end up looking like free dirty weathering. I think this was a good choice as it aged the roof and helped tie it together with the brown door. For the windows, I'm using a little piece of this foggy dollar store cutting mat so you can't look inside to see how unfinished it is. My technique was to make the windows slightly too big and then squeeze them into the space. So I was sitting around the other day when I picked myself up a few of these. I'm going to use a half segment to make a curved, partially open garage door using hot glue and a bunch of coffee stirring sticks. The order of paint operations went black base coat, brown overbrush, then khaki dry brush. The garage is permanently half open because the power was cut off. Time for the iconic Jurassic Park gate. I made this from several scrap chunks of pink XPS foam hot glued together with toothpick bones for strength. Then I gave it several passes of texture, including jabbing it with a lumpy foil ball and splotching on modeling paste to make it extra stone-like. To give some more randomness to the stone color, I stippled on various dark grays, then highlighted the edges with a lighter gray, and then finished off by dabbing on a dark wash to meld it all together. And as for the name on the gate, HUDSONFILM, here's a little backstory. This was the very imaginative name that my brother and I made for our pretend film company. You have to understand that the year was 2002 and nothing loomed quite as largely as the greatest love story of our time. And even in present year, I'm not sure if anything has changed.
Not a day has gone by when I haven't thought of you.
I dipped the paper in a bit of watered down Mod Podge to hide my tears, then dabbed off the excess with a cotton swab. For the two doors, I'm using coffee stirring sticks, which I held in place with a strip of upside down painter's tape that I taped to the table. I used super glue because I was impatient, but regular white PVA glue would have been a much stronger choice. I decided to have the doors partially open in a cool action pose, and not actually because the doors are way too wide to stay closed anyway, whoops. Alright, time to go back to the base and have some fun with mud. I'm mixing up a sealant and ground cover using Mod Podge, brown paint, baking soda, and heck, why not a little bit of actual dirt as well, it's on brand. I spread it over the whole base until it looked like one big pile of should you need some additional ground cover to add some texture variation, try adding a little bit of PVA glue into various cracks and edges and then sprinkling on some pebbles borrowed from outside. For the roadway, I'm adding a metal rail since, as you know, the cars have no drivers. They're electric. They run along this track in the middle of the roadway here. Totally non-polluting, top of the line, spared every expense because they're made of scrap cardboard. I thought about just painting the road gray, but then I found this grout in my garage that was already the perfect DeLorean gray.
Where we're going, we need roads.
I took a first pass using a Garbo brush that I don't care about, but the better spread method was to use a wet finger to eliminate the lumps. Then I dripped and splotched up several passes of a dark acrylic wash until I was satisfied with the level of pavement grime. Randomness was key here. I didn't dab up all of it. It was also much more subtle after it was dry. I'm spreading out a thick layer of watered down PVA glue, then sprinkling on some dirt using a sieve. This probably isn't necessary if you're going to cover the dirt with grass later, but I just like to feel authentic. To seal in the dirt, I'm spraying down some isopropyl alcohol, which helps open up the dirt pores so that I can properly saturate every grain in watered down Mod Podge. I was a little overzealous with the dirt and got it everywhere, but it was actually really fun to sweep it up with this tiny broom. It's because normally brooms are person size, but this time it was too small for me, was the thing. The paintbrush was. Wonderful surprises in this house. Alright, time to add a little bit of green to this barren wasteland. I'm going to use various shades of green, dark green, a light yellow as well, just to add some variation through all our flocking. There are many different ways of adding flocking to dioramas, but I prefer
flocking this way.
I have a bunch of these cheapo palm trees. The leaves are acceptable, but this plastic trunk is garb. I need a real stick. To make these trunks, I'm drilling out a hole at each end using a pin vise, then supergluing in a piece of armature wire at each end. One could argue that the coloring on these sticks was a lot better before I painted them, but it's already done. To one of the wires, I glued the palm frond spider, and then on the other end, I stabbed it into the foam base. When I first bought these plastic trees, I was thinking,
I hate trees.
But actually after fixing them up,
They don't bother me.
I had a few leftover palm fronds from the trees and tried fashioning a fern by stuffing fronds down this glue hole and then hiding the mess with some fine green flocking. The lawn here was looking passable, but last week I binged a bunch of Luke's Geek Gaming Scenics videos and decided to combo it up with some static grass and just a few patches. Then I added some bushes using this clump foliage, which I also used to fill in these planter boxes. Whoa, what are these? What's he making upside down on this pane of glass? Are they hot glue stalactites? Nope, they're hot glue stalagmites. Here's a hot tip. Use the hot tip of the hot glue gun to craft tiny flame effects. After they're cool, they pop off pretty easily, then I reheated the end so I could stick the torch effects to the gate. Just a bit of yellow paint followed up with some orange dry brushing near the tip, and it's fire. With the flames lit, it's time to open the park. All we're missing now are a few dino liabilities loose on the park grounds. Special thanks as always to the power of the patrons for helping me make this video. I wouldn't be able to make these videos as often as I can without the support there. And secondarily, as always, smashing that subscribe button and smashing that keyboard in the comments is a great way to keep the park open. Looks like we're ready for the beauty shots. Alright Ray, start the tour program.
Hold on to your butts.
The T-Rex doesn't have any park schedules. That's chaos theory.
I'm still not clear on this chaos theory.
It's easy. Give me that glass of water. Which way will the water fall?
Back.
Which way will the water fall now?
Whoa, it's different.
Yeah, that's chaos.
Oh, so that's chaos theory.